cities that won't exist once the sea level rises. According to UN estimates, 790 million people, or about 10% of the world's population, reside along the coastlines of the world. Along these coastlines, many of the biggest cities have grown. These seaside cities have thrived as a result of the simplicity of trade and commerce. These cities are among the most populated and economic centers, which puts millions of people at risk. Cities having a population of more than 5 million people are found in 2/3 of these at-risk coastal regions. Many people are concerned whether their towns and nations will dissolve away as sea levels rise. In truth, some of the cities that are expected to vanish are still startling. In some situations, a number of cities will either entirely flood or vanish. New Orleans, Charleston, Miami Beach, and Galveston are few examples of communities that may vanish once sea levels rise. Keep watching to find out which cities might be next. New Orleans, Louisiana. By the year 2100, there will likely be a rise of 5 feet, and New Orleans may completely vanish. While the city has spent the last 10 years recovering from severe flooding, the area may soon become swamped due to sea level rise. The marshes that once shielded the city from flooding have been completely destroyed by human activities. The city's ability to stand will be hampered by this quick sinking. The city might be underwater before the century is out if the ongoing repair efforts are discontinued. Within 50 years, according to scientists, Louisiana coastal marshes will vanish. At this rate, ocean water will totally engulf the wetlands. Sea level rise has already harmed the city's seafood business. The wetlands would completely vanish if sea levels rise more, forcing many locals to relocate. Nearly 15,000 square kilometers of wetlands will be submerged underwater in 70 years. Unfortunately, that period of time is much too short for workable remedies to take root. When 5% of New Orleans fell below sea level in 1895, things began to change for the city. Nearly 30% of the city was below sea level by 1935, and today, more than 50% of it is situated below sea level. The urban areas resemble a growing bowl that is encircled by water. According to one study, 500,000 residents of the Big Easy will have to relocate within the next 100 years. Charleston, South Carolina. Despite the outspoken voices of environmental organizations like the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, coastal communities like Charleston, South Carolina have largely kept silent on climate change. In reality, Charleston has not considered climate change and has instead concentrated on other issues like shoreline and coastal erosion. Charleston's coastal flooding has risen 5 inches in the last century, according to the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League. Charleston's floods are predicted to increase by over 50% by 2100. Due to its low-lying terrain and average height of only 60 feet above sea level, South Carolina is particularly prone to flooding. In fact, one estimate that a 1-foot rise in sea level would submerge an area of the state greater than Rhode Island, or close to 2,000 square miles. Millions of people will be forced to relocate, and billions of dollars worth of property would be destroyed. Scientists from the State Department of Natural Resources issued a paper in 2013 warning of the dangers of rising sea levels as a result of these worries. Political appointees, however, buried the report and changed the executive summary. According to the study, sea levels might rise by 1 to 6 feet within the next century. Given that Charleston is currently experiencing flooding, the estimates for the rise are more worrisome. Thankfully, South Carolina hasn't experienced a severe hurricane since 1989, but another disastrous storm might destroy many of these seawalls and oceanfront neighborhoods. Miami, Florida. Miami Beach is in danger of being completely submerged as sea levels rise. 5 to 6 feet of sea level rise would make Miami all but inhabitable. In the worst case scenario, Miami Beach would be entirely underwater, and the first floor of many structures in downtown Miami would be submerged. Critical infrastructure, such as the runways at Miami International Airport and the cargo docks in the Port of Miami, would also be destroyed as a result of saltwater intrusion. Even if it might be 50 or 100 years before Miami Beach is affected, the rate at which sea levels are increasing is worrying. Extreme weather events like king tides and extraordinarily high tides are becoming increasingly frequent in coastal regions. According to research by William Sweet of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Miami Beach has experienced 16 flood incidents between 1998 and 2005, and another 16 in the 6 years between 2006 and 2013. Miami Beach is still susceptible to severe floods, despite the $4 billion in investments made by the state of Florida to reduce the harm caused by sea level rise. Even at low tide, around 1,200 dwellings are submerged. John Morales, a Miami meteorologist, claims that the city has already invested $400 million on measurements for neighborhoods that frequently flood. In the low-lying residential area of Belmead, adaptation projects got underway. Miami's 20-foot seawall will not shield the city from the worst effects of sea level rise despite the investments. Galveston, Texas. Galveston is a popular stop for cruise ships and family getaways because it is a resort city and port known for its beaches and botanical gardens. However, due to its proximity to water, Galveston, like many other ports and islands, will be inundated sooner rather than later, the very thing that attracts so many visitors. By 2060, about half of the usable land will be underwater, and by 2100, virtually all of it will be underwater. It might be time for those cruise ships to start looking for new locations farther inland. The likelihood of significant flooding on the island has grown as the sea levels rises. According to scientists, the high tide line on the island will be reached by sea levels by 2030. The city's seawalls were constructed as a means of defense against rising sea levels in order to safeguard the infrastructure and beach. However, the rates of sea level increase are unheard of. A Category 4 hurricane is predicted to hit the island by the year 2100. 32 miles of beaches and innumerable eateries in Galveston, Texas will be submerged. Moody Gardens, a well-known city aquarium and natural park, may be submerged by the time our children are adults. Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh City might be underwater by 2050. The average annual rise in sea level is about 0.45 millimeters. The Ho Chi Minh City government has suggested erecting a city wall that would run 23 kilometers from the city to the Gokong Coastal District. Although it may cost roughly $6 billion to build, it will shield the city from increasing sea levels. According to the latest study, 3 times as many individuals as originally thought will experience the effects of climate change. Maps created by the New Jersey-based scientific organization Climate Central reveal which regions of Vietnam may be underwater by the year 2050. By that point, 40 to 45% of Ho Chi Minh City will be below sea level. The city is now more susceptible to storms and heavy rains, and increasingly, there are areas that are vulnerable to tidal floods. In the southern regions of the country, flooding is a common occurrence. Every year, floods occur in the Mekong Delta area, which is south of Ho Chi Minh City. The JBA Risk Management Company estimates that the annual cost of flood-related damage in these delta regions is $71 million. Many of the locals here produce shrimp and fish. A significant flood in 2011 cost an estimated $600 million, killed 265 people, and destroyed more than 449,000 homes. Local governments have started putting up solar and wind energy around the nation to fend off these catastrophes. New developments are being built with flood protection in mind. Saigon's fast expansion has brought it even closer to the river. Massive sinking has been brought on by this increased strain on the city's infrastructure. Since the early 1990s, the city has experienced frequent flooding, but the government is not doing enough to stop it. Jakarta, Indonesia. While no nation is expected to be completely wiped out by sea level rise by 2100, a number of major cities face a real risk of catastrophic flooding. The capital city of Indonesia, Jakarta, is among the most glaring instances of how rising sea levels could cause significant issues for these vulnerable countries. The capital city of Jakarta, Indonesia, is among the most glaring instances of how rising sea levels could cause significant issues for these vulnerable countries. Jakarta, which has a population of over 10 million, is the fastest sinking city in the world, sinking by 2 to 4 inches or 5 to 10 centimeters a year as a result of excessive groundwater draining, claims Earth.org, a non-profit environmental organization based in Hong Kong. When sea levels are rising, this is a calamity waiting to happen. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2050, much of Jakarta would be underwater. The situation in Jakarta is so severe that the Santara, a soon-to-be-built city on Borneo's east coast, roughly 1,200 miles or 2,000 kilometers from Jakarta, is replacing it as the nation's capital. Venice, Italy. According to Bloomberg, the Italian city of Venice has had 163 high-water incidents during the past 20 years due to tides, winds, and lunar cycles. Venice is also suffering record-breaking sea level rise. The city experienced 166 high-water events over the course of the previous century. The European Geosciences Union report projects that by 2100, water levels could rise by up to 3 feet. What does this mean for the city of Venice? Seawater is already weakening foundations, deteriorating structures, and increasing the danger of structural failure in Venice. The average water level in Venice has already risen to a risky level that endangers the ancient structures in the city as well as its very existence. This is just a partial list of the many cities and communities that are threatened by sea level rise. It could mean an end to a way of life for many. The potential for large-scale displacement of people and the loss of cultural heritage is real. The time to act is now. Coastal communities around the world are facing an impending crisis as a result of sea level rise. If we don't take immediate action, many of these cities and communities will be lost forever. Can you think of other cities that will also be impacted by sea level rise? Let us know in the comments below.